how we can go with JSS, and I will start with short introduction of myself. And actually, I have more than 10 years programming experience, and since April 2012, I work for Brimit. I have more than 8 years experience in Sitecore. I'm Sitecore Technology MVP since 2018, and currently I'm located in Minsk. Also, Alex Shyba with us today, and Alex is Ex-Sitecorian and co-founder of Uniform, and he will do a quick demo to show Sitecore Edge personalization in action, powered by Uniform. Uh, Today I will share how our team uses JSS, React, Akamai, and Uniform for creating a website with millions of users for tourism agency. And first of all, a disclaimer: as long as our customer is National Tourism Organization, we have NDA that doesn't allow us to share the customer's name and some project details. And the second one, I'm not a front-end and React developer, and probably I will not be able to answer specific React-related questions. So, but I can try at least. And go ahead. GSS was announced a few years ago, and I think many of us know what is it and how it looks like. But anyway, I will say a few general words about it. So GSS is a toolkit for JavaScript developers, allowing to build full-fledged customer solutions like single-page applications, web apps, websites, and using modern JavaScript libraries and frameworks, and by being completely unplugged from Sitecore. As we can see on diagram, GSS is based on such services as layout, GraphQL, and dictionary services. There is also import service. I separated it because it doesn't take a part in the rendering process. In case using a code-first approach, this service is used for deploying changes to Sitecore. We also see the config where GSS apps are defined in Sitecore. There are also a Node.js server and Node.js view engine, which are used for rendering components based on the data which is provided by layout service. The view engine is used when rendering is performed on the Sitecore side rather than on the Node.js server side. But take into account that in both cases, the data for rendering comes from the layout service. As we know, Sitecore 10 was released not so long ago. There are not many new GSS features with this release. The changes are mostly related to improved stability and support for new platform features. The image represents Sitecore 10 architecture. There are not a lot of changes. We can still see the same services such as layout, dictionary, import service, GraphQL, rendering engine as in our previous diagram. Sitecore connected all these services in a separate module called Sitecore Headless Services. And this module, previously known as a Sitecore JavaScript Services Server, provides the server-side APIs and components which are required for the ASP.NET Core Rendering SDK, which is new and comes with Sitecore 10, and JavaScript Rendering SDK, previously known as JSS. Now is the time to switch to the main point of the presentation, sharing my experience of using GSS on the real project, which is currently in production. A few words about our client. The customer had a platform built using Sitecore 7 and was looking to build a new one using Sitecore 9, where Sitecore is used as a headless CMS. It was also planned to integrate the new platform with selected marketing technologies in their digital experience platform. The scope of the project includes migrating content, keeping the existing custom integrations and extensions from the old platform. The new platform includes 4 sites with separate sitemaps under separate domains, and each site will have a new design following a modular approach. One of the requirements of the project is a time to interactive should be less than 1 second. The TTI metric measures the time a page takes before the user can interact with it. And in other words, it's how long before page responds to the click. Almost all architectural decisions are made around this requirement, and I will call it like a main requirement during the presentation. So let's have a look at the servers infrastructure. All our deployments are automated. We utilize the Azure DevOps for releases, and the actual server infrastructure consists of 3 groups: QA, UAT, and production. And currently on the screen we can see the QA environment. So we have 2 groups: content management group and content delivery group. The content management group is always the same for all of our environments, and we can see 2 CM servers here and load balancer between them. There are a few reasons to have 2 CM servers. The first one is we target to support a high availability for each our nodes, including CM servers. And the second one, we have configured to run all our scheduled and heavy tasks on only 1 CM server for keeping another one always fresh and available to work with. Uh, we have 2 publishing services, and we find out that publishing service can be scaled up automatically. You just need to install 2, for example, 2 publishing service, and they work with the same item publishing queue, and it works much more faster, and nothing else required to scale it up. And so we have Solar search engine connected to the content management group only, so our content delivery server doesn't have any access to the Solar and doesn't at all. We have backend identity server, which is standard Sitecore identity server provided by default. We have Azure directory connected to the content management group. So the delivery group has 2 content delivery servers and load balancer between, so pretty standard. Nothing interesting here. And we have front-end identity server, which is built on uh, original Microsoft identity server and used to log in users and visitors on the site. Let's switch to the UAT environment, and there is only one difference, that we have a blue and green content delivery servers, and so the difference is we utilize the blue-green deployments for UAT and for production environments. And our production looks like on the image, and we can see that we have 2 groups of content delivery servers. Actually, they're green and blue groups, and load balancer on them. And this load balancer is not really regular, because actually this Akamat plays this role, but we will speak about it a bit later. So go further, and our solution architecture, I mean the backend solution architecture, and I was thinking a lot what to show on this slide, but our backend part is pretty much conventional and Helix-based solution, where the integrations helpers basic stuff for features represent the foundation layer. Each module in Sitecore represents a feature in solution. A feature always includes a unicorn configuration. Also, it can optionally have rendering content resolver if a component requires a custom one, configs, and other Sitecore related code for preparing data. And so each project in backend represent the website in Sitecore. Before switching to the front-end solution architecture, I want to go through the definition of code first and Sitecore first GSS approaches. In case using code first approach, front-end developer works disconnected from Sitecore and defines Sitecore structure via in code component definitions and root data. And Sitecore information architecture is generated via the import process. And this approach is recommended for smaller projects or temporary sites like campaigns, for the front-end led projects, and for micro apps within the larger site. And in case of using the first approach, Sitecore information architecture are created by Sitecore developer. No import process initialized in case. Front-end developers works disconnected from Sitecore and create components and mock root data based on the specification or contract provided by Sitecore developer. And contract can be defined first to allow concurrent work. And this approach is recommended for larger and complex projects, organizations looking for full control over that core information architecture. So our project is complex. We are definitely looking for full control over the set core architecture. So that core first approach is an obvious choice in our case. And now we can switch to the set core information architecture, which is represents a multi-site solution. Actually, 4 sites we have, and multi-language. So multi-language, we set up 20 languages, and utilizing the Sitecore first approach, we have a full control across architecture, and it allows us to have a content structure we want, any number of page templates with a preset presentation on standard values, branches with default data sources, and from the Sitecore perspective, it looks pretty standard, and nothing says that it is a headless solution. So our architecture follows Helix design principles, and where a site, including placeholder settings, branches, templates, and content, is the project layer. A module which can contain more than one component is the feature layer, and base states, data models, integrations, workflows, global settings, and other stuff are the foundation layer. So all rendering which we used on the site represent the JSON renderings, and this type of rendering doesn't have any implementation on backend. So please look at the images and just explain our structure. I renamed our website because I can share that their name, but we have 4 sites here, and basically one site has different layout and different domain. Rest of them has the same layout but different colors, just settings and configuration, but layout is the same. They have the same domain, but they have different virtual folders. So one more important thing that we have a global data here. We have articles, events, POIs, itineraries, news, and some other data storing globally. And the items under these folders represent the pages with the presentation setup, with local data sources, and all our sites reuse these pages. And so actually these pages are global, and we faced some difficulties with this stuff, and I will explain it a bit later. So our React solution architecture, we built a slightly different solution, React solution compared to a standard GSS. We did it because we had 4 different websites. Some of them have a different layout. We implemented about 150 components. At least half of them are shared and used by each website. The rest of them are website specific. To avoid component duplication, we separated the component implementation and GSS apps. Eventually, we have the following. Uh, we have a UI components React project, which contains the components implementation. We can see the 3 groups of components here. Uh, we have a shared React app project, which is common for Site 2, Site 3, Site 4 from the previous diagram. It is very similar to the original GSS React app, but has only one difference. It doesn't have a component implementation. All components are included to the app as an npm dependency. So I call it shared because 3 of our sites use the same GSS app, and we have Site 1 GSS app, which is used just by Site 1. UI components project has 2 build commands, which is used to separate export files where we define the components. One for shared and one for the site 1. The build command uses own export file, which includes the list of components that should be included to the package. The difference is in their number. Each of them includes only the components that are required for the specific one, for the specific site. After the build is complete, the code is published to the private Azure npm repository. Then when we build the shared app, for example, and when the build is happened, it downloads the corresponding package from the components with the components from the repository. This is really helpful because we have to take care of each byte of assets to meet our main requirement. So now another important scene from my presentation is the content delivery network. In our case, we use Akamai cache, and it is probably the most important part in trying to meet our main requirement. Akamai is the leading cloud-based CDN service provider for media and software delivery. All of our websites are fully cached by Akamai. I found Akamai to be a powerful tool in addition to caching. And that in addition to caching can manage the traffic route, can be used as a load balancer, rewrite URLs, perform personalization, and other very cool stuff. So Akamai helps us, for example, to implement the blue-green deployments. At the beginning of UAT or production deployment, we force Akamai to route all traffic to the green group using PowerShell command and start deploying to the blue. Once it is deployed, we are able to verify this and it's fine. We route traffic to the currently deployed blue group and start to deploy to the green. At the end, we force Akamai to route traffic to the both groups, and in this case, we have 0 downtime during the production and UAT deployments. And traditionally, only static content can be cached by Akamai when it is used with Sitecore. Caching images, scripts, and other static files can improve site performance by decreasing the load on the Sitecore content delivery server, but a lot of work still remains for the CD server. Any part of websites that uses personalization must be handled by CD server. And this approach appears to be simple. The visitor connects to the Sitecore instance, Sitecore builds the page, and Sitecore returns the page to the visitor. The problem is that puts a huge load on the Sitecore instance. So then you have to start scaling up or scaling down. It also means that you cannot take full advantage of CDN. Science personalization has to be run on the Sitecore instance. The CDN's usage is limited to delivering images and other static content, static assets only. But to meet our main requirement, we have to cache HTML as well. Another requirement is to be able to personalize components. So taking into account that Akamai can run personalization on Edge, customers decided to utilize Uniform to connect Sitecore personalization with Akamai. And probably this is time when I will switch the presentation to Alex.
Thanks, Artem. Good stuff. So yeah, in terms of what we can do with Uniform for Sitecore, we have multiple tracks, and we're gonna be focusing on the orange boxes here. So Sitecore JSS story, how can we accelerate content delivery by using CDNs like Akamai and offloading personalization execution into CDN itself. There's not many CDNs that can execute logic, but it becomes the next frontier for CDNs to differentiate their services. So Cloudflare is one of the CDNs that able to execute logic. On AWS, you have AWS Lambda at Edge available. Netlify announced Edge handlers, ability to control request response model where you can deploy ad hoc code and use their platform as compute pretty much. And Akamai is one of them. There's two different flavors of that logic execution. We support both. Um, One is through edge side includes, which effectively think about it as if else statement baked into your markup. And another one is edge workers, that is tiny V8 agents running on 260,000 servers around the world that Akamai has a part of their network. So multiple options there. So what this allows is keep assignment of configuration of personalization in Sitecore as is, and Uniform module will transform them into statements that can be executed on the CDN level. So this effectively allows you to cache all your pages on CDN level without lost functionality. On top of that, the tracking, this is usually what you would lose if you cache pages with CDN. We supplement that with a client-side tracker. So we'll focus on, there are other capabilities. This also works with MVC, and we also have ability to export MVC sites statically, which is a complementary capability. But here we're talking about traditional Sitecore content delivery server that renders your JSS app and maximizing the use of CDNs. One thing that we actually worked jointly with Artem and Brimit team on this customer, and one of the things that they absolutely love about this architecture is that they can keep their existing on-prem data center. Since they have global audience, they can offload 100% content delivery to CDN. So effectively, they're able to deliver content as fast as possible to the users, but also reuse their existing data center, which they invested a lot of time and effort in spinning up. And this also reduces the amount of servers and their vertical horizontal scale profile. If you essentially have Sitecore render the page only once for all the users, that means that you need just less instances and less powerful instances to power serious traffic. So Akamai is doing all the heavy lifting. So it's an interesting sort of hybrid architecture. So the way it would work on the next slide, Artem, if you can switch, please, with the actual mechanics overall. So when the visitor is going to hit the your cached your cached endpoint on I, you'll see the request hitting layout service, and this request can actually hit either HTML page or layout service, which gives you JSON right response back for your page data. So Akamat will check if it's a cache hit or miss. If this resource is cached, then it's gonna process serving it as is. If not, it's gonna go back to Sitecore CB server to pull it from the origin. This will happen only once per page update. So it's not gonna happen multiple times per user. So if your pages are there unchanged from publishing perspective, they can be kept in cache for days. And as a part of that response, a uniform module on top of Sitecore will augment the page payload, whether it's a layout service or rendered HTML page, with personalization rules that will be baked into the markup. So that this will allow to decorate the page with these special instructions that allow Akamai to understand how to rewrite its response. So you can see this ESI choose. So effectively, if else, condition is interrogating a cookie. It can interrogate geo context, HTTP headers. There's multiple options, device characteristics, for example. So in this context, you can enrich with uniform tracker. So if you do have some additional attributes, such as Salesforce CRM visitor attribute, you can bring that into a cookie, and then you can start personalizing on it. So it's you're not limited to only what you can do from kind of what Akamai knows about you. You can enrich that pretty easily. So once that whole response with the ESI statements is returned, then it's going to be cached and executed. So rewritten response with just the components, just the part of the page you need to see will be returned to the response. So that's there's quite a lot of stuff going on. That's cache miss. When we're talking about cache hit, which is another request, it will be quite a collapsed sequence. Because things will be served straight up from Akamai cache. Artem, if you can switch to another slide, please. So you can see cache hit is not engaging Sitecore content delivery server at all. And this allows you to scale out together with Akamai where just indefinitely and maintain really low time to first byte characteristics. So let's see this in action. I have a little bit of a demo. I'll switch to my screen. Demo time. All right. How's my screen looking? I'm on a very wide monitor, so let me know if that's still okay.
I think seems to be a little bit visible. Maybe I'm on a small screen now.
Yeah, let me adjust that real quick. Let's do 9. There we go. Is that a bit better?
Yeah, that seems to be.
Yep.
All right, awesome. Thank you. So here's a quick example of sorry, I'm hearing myself. Could you please, but can you mute yourself, please? There we go. Thank you so much. All right. So we have an instance in Azure Pass deployed with a quick demo site, and I have a couple pages with some personalization set up. So I have a campaign page here. When I have a March campaign variants here, everything is configured exactly the same way. There is a campaign match condition, which is will interrogate query string UTM campaign, and if I'm matching that, I'll be able to see March campaign. Right? So that's one example. And this site is public, so feel free to walk around with it. I just make sure you access it via with www in front via HTTP. Didn't have certificates installed. So HTTP uniformpersonalization.com, and there is MVC and uniform JSS version that you can experience how fast this thing is. Uh, so pretty standard Sitecore personalization. Now let's see this in action. We're gonna hit March Madness, and you can see I'm seeing personalized content. If I'm changing this to something else, I'll be able to see default content because the match is not there anymore. If I go back, reload it, you can see time to first byte is super low, 28 milliseconds. Sometimes I get lower than 20. This is comparable with local. If you've seen your network profile clock cycle locally, this is pretty much what you would get probably around 25 milliseconds. So this is pretty close to running site locally, but the Azure instance is I think in West US, and this is now globally cached. Now, what happens if I'm doing cache miss? So so let me show you Geo first. So with Geo, shows me content for USA. If I go back and see how the Geo page is configured, it's pretty using standard Sitecore personalization conditions, which we respect and map to what we can execute on CDN level. Akamat has geo context already, so that's something you can easily enable as a feature. So you don't have to go anywhere for geo IP lookup. It's there. It's that information is on the edge. So here you can see I'm using standard Sitecore country conditions. So if I'm visiting from Denmark, I should be able to see another piece of content. So let me switch to Denmark, Copenhagen, and here's my Danish content. Still pretty low time to first byte because the whole page is already cached. So it's served from Akamai Edge, and it's making the decision which content to be shown here. What's cool also is that you can see I'm navigating from page to page. If I go back to campaign, there is no full page load. You can see my document load here is not updating. So I'm in single page application mode. So if I switch char in XHR traffic, we only layout service requests, which means that in order to support single page application architecture, what you also need is personalized layout service as well. It's not sufficient to personalize just the HTML page. So this means that the layout service output that we received for layout service is also personalized. So if we look into our hero image, it actually has a personalized variants already here. This allows us to handle personalization within the single page application context. Now for Geo, we've looked into that. Let's see what happens. This is a web page test simulated from Dubai. So I'm hitting from Dubai origin, and my first request is gonna do a cache miss. And you can see, look into this over 4.5 seconds load time because this is the first time I visited this page from that location. And if we look into profile, you can see that time to first byte is almost 1 second. So before user can see anything, you can see total time to first byte plus DNS lookup, connection time, load. It's close to 1.5 seconds, and that's on the fastest cable network. So before visitors can see anything. On mobile, this will be way over 2 seconds. So what will happen during these 2 seconds, the browser will be spinning and we see blank page, right? So before document can be delivered. Now check out the difference here. This is a second request that's also already serving from Akamat cache. And Akamat cache is multi-tier, so the more traffic you get, the faster cache, the faster the site will become. So when we were doing a silly exercise of load testing with this configuration, so you can see that the site becomes faster with more users, which is sort of hilarious. So you can see the delta here, 77 millisecond time to first byte, and as the screenshot indicates, you get a personalized content here. So you see hero for Dubai. So that's the power of offloading decision making for your personalization to the edge, where which is the most proximate to your visitors. Besides geo, we can support pretty much anything you want to throw at us. So if let's say your code drops a cookie into interrogating your CDP or your CRM, and what you get as a result is a cookie. If we look into cookies, where's my cookies? There we go. Segment 1000 here. See, if I put something different, refresh it, you can see I have a default content. If I put segment 100, I'll see Thrill Seeker. So though I'm changing profile, you can see my performance. If I switch to doc, my performance of the page delivery stays consistently low. So if my imagining any code that would be changing cookies based on whatever is going on with that visitor and external system, you can bring that in app, set the cookie, and then you can act on it. So from the standpoint of configuring it, it can be if we look at customer segment page. I have 3 conditions, 3 variances here, where cookie segment value string equals 100, then I'm a thrill seeker. If segment is 1000, I'm a luxury segment. So from user standpoint, it could be as obfuscated as you want it to be. So this could be a GUID downstream. So you definitely don't want to expose the names of customer segments, so the users are not offended potentially by that, or they cannot kind of mess with this. So it can be from the what the client side knows about it. It can be as obfuscated as you want it to be. And from the business users, you can actually create a more domain specific condition that would say, if customer segment is a luxury, behind the scenes, it will translate to something as raw and obfuscated as this, but it can still be pleasant for businesses to make the selection and configure this. And finally, we have also device-based. Optimize EdgeScape feature allows us to also understand what device you're on. So if we switch to Apple, refresh, and here's our personalization for Apple device. And again, there is no service to go to. There is no device database to keep in memory and go to this origin server to extract that information. It's available at the edge, and you can act on it at the edge. So you can really build really cool apps that scale, and they do not require a Swiss bank account to operate and scale out. So that's it for a quick demo. If you have any questions, happy to take them.
A lot of cool stuff. So probably first question would be to Artsem, and then I will come back to you X on the edge related questions. I did see your architecture diagram. You did mention about there is no solver for the CD delivery group. So I wasn't sure like how would that work. Artsem there or
Yes, I'm here.
okay.
So can we finish the presentation? Actually, it is not my latest slide. I have a few more slides, and then we can go through the questions. Or
Oh, okay. Sorry, I didn't realize that. I thought like we are done with this. So
it's Alex's part is done, but I'm not done yet.
okay, sounds good. Go ahead then. We'll keep the questions for the last. Sorry about that.
Okay. Okay, and so the next interesting part of our project is the search, and in pursuit of reducing a number of server requests, we made a decision to utilize the Algolia search, and the Algolia provides search as a service, offering web search across a client's website using an external hosted search engine. It provides a very useful API to use it with React. We have full control over the items which we need and which we want to store in Algolia. And so, as I said previously, we have different types of data such as events, articles, POIs, and also we have a lot of dynamic components that show this data, and all these components get data to show from a search engine based on the tags selected in data source. Let's have a look at the diagram, and I will explain how it works. Actually, so once authors make any changes in content and publish them, it takes to the web database, and immediately when item is updated in database, it will be updated in Sitecore index as well. We have a scheduled task which is run on this CM server, and it is run every 30 minutes. It takes the latest updated items from the index and process them and send to the Algolia. So here we can see our React JSS app, and we have, let's say, two types of components. We have statics components and we have dynamics components. When JSS renders a page, it requests a JSON from the layout servers, and which come within the JSON for statics components is enough to render them. There are just an image and maybe text, some text, and also there are data which is represented in data source by data source, and for the dynamics component, and the data source for the dynamics component just have some configuration data which we use to build a query to the Algolia. For example, we have the number of results that we expect from Algolia. Maybe we have the template ID that we use to identify which kind of data we expect from Algolia. We have a list of selected tags that we use to build the relevant to get relevant data from Algolia, like related articles, maybe latest news or news related to some area. All this data is tagged, and we use tags to search this data. One more important thing that allows us to achieve the main requirement is the performance budget. It defines a page size which guarantees that the page will be loaded faster than 1 second. The performance budget of initially visible components of the page should be less than 750 kilobytes. So we utilize a React Dynamics import to make the initial page weight less. Each component represents a separate chunk, and is loaded dynamically when the component reaches the visible area. We have implemented the custom workflow state or which pass the items through the performance budget validation. If validation is failed, item cannot be published. We have on the screen you can see some tables with different metrics, and actually, for example, our client expects that the page will be loaded faster than 1 second only for the cable and for fiber optics network. Uh, and all requirements is built based on this requirement as well. We used Sitecore Forms on our project to build the forms. Actually, for example, contact us form that we can see on the screen now, and supporting the Sitecore Forms by GSS was announced along with Sitecore 9.3 release. And to be able to use forms, you have to add the Sitecore JSS forms, Sitecore JSS React Forms modules for JSS React application. Nothing required from the server side, and it works fine out of the box. We have faced only one issue with the cache of anti-forgery token. The token is unique for each form loading, but we have got it cached, and all form submissions were failed, and we didn't find any elegant solution and just exclude the page from the Akamai from the Akamai HTML cache. Okay, so now a few words about the most extendable probably part of GSS, its layout service context, and let's understand it as a similar thing as a Sitecore context. It includes some basic stuff like the context type, page state, language, current context language, I mean. So page editing mode. And so it's pretty similar with Sitecore context, but we also extended with some configuration stuff. We can see that we have Algolia tokens. For example, here we have some Google tokens that front-end developers use to send a request to the Algolia and build some Google APIs, and to use Google APIs for build some Google Maps, for example. And so there was a question regarding the security of this. So to put this data to the layout service output, but all these things are expected to be safe, to be included in the front end, and no matter how you include those in the app, this will be discoverable anyway from the browser. We also put some breadcrumb alternative URLs to the context, so it is the stuff that is common for the whole page, not for the component, actually. There are two ways to define how a rendering and its associated data are serialized. Rendering contents resolver and the component GraphQL query. And I have prepared a short example how to compare both of them, so compare each other. And I have created a JSON rendering component with default rendering contents resolver that serializes a data source item if it is set. I have created a data source template with 3 fields: title, description, and image. And I've created an item based on this template. And I have added the component to the page and chosen previously created data source item as a data source. And when I request the page from the layout service, and I see the JSON that I get for this component, we can see the title, description, and image, 3 fields that we have in data source, and it is how it works by default. Then to compare it with the GraphQL, I extend my JSON rendering with GraphQL query, and to make it more interesting, I added some additional data. For example, I add the title and page title from the context item. I put the same the same fields from the data source, and I prepared an example how we use the dictionaries. We don't use the out-of-the-box dictionary service provided by Sitecore out-of-the-box because we always want to be sure that we don't receive any unnecessary data because the default dictionary service responds all dictionaries that the application has. But in our case, we built a custom structure of dictionaries where each component has the list of dictionaries related to it. And also take into account that the function of the query have 2 parameters. It's data source and context item, which is IDs, Sitecore, which is item IDs, and we can use them to get some data from data source or from context item. As on my example, we can see the GSS keyword here. The Sitecore processes it automatically and depends which field type is. It put it gets value from the corresponding property of the field actually. So if it's text field, it's just a value. If it's image, for example, the image passes are stored in the SRC property, and you don't need to think where the value of the field are stored. You just put GSS and Sitecore do that automatically. Also, the GSS keyword is adds the additional stuff that is required for building the experience editor functionality. If you open the page in the experience editor only. So when I request the page again with the GraphQL query, I got the following JSON, and we can see the homepage title from the context item. We still see the same 3 fields from data source and 1 dictionary which is associated with the component. Then I try to build a custom rendering contents resolver and try to prepare the same example as using GraphQL, and you can see that at least I need to know the field IDs or field names at least, and then we need to retrieve the context item, we need to retrieve the data source item, then we need to read the field's value, then we need to check if the value exists or not. We need to check if it's experience editor mode or not and add additional data to build experience editor. So you also take into account that I didn't put any code to prepare dictionaries here. So in my point of view, using GraphQL is much more faster and flexible. Only one difficulty with GraphQL, probably 2 difficulties that I'm faced with GraphQL, that we need always care about the template names. GraphQL doesn't like when you have 2 templates with the same name. It always raises some issues, and with naming at least. And also, we don't have any conditioned functions that we can use with GraphQL. So we can use the if statement with GraphQL, but sometimes it's very necessary. Okay, we also implemented a few custom queries for GraphQL, and the first one is site-specific item query, and we need it because we have 4 websites with the same structure, and each website has some configuration stuff. Let's for example, listing button as an example. And when by GraphQL by default cannot use the relative passes by default, and if you want to use the same component with 4 websites, and you shouldn't you cannot do it by default because you need to implement 4 components with full passes to the article listing button. So we extended our functionality to make it possible to use the relative passes for the website based on the website actually. Also, we implemented the custom search query to allow us to search item by item ID, because by default GraphQL cannot search items by IDs at all. You just use some search by text fields, passes, but in our case we have to search under the context item, but the context item is parameter of the GraphQL query, and as I said before, it represents the item ID, and we wanted to use this parameter and to try to search something under the context item, and we extend default search query with additional functionality to be able to do that. One more instance in that you probably can face when you try to override some item resolver, and working with GSS, you have 2 item resolvers. The default one, which you usually override when working with MVC solution, and it is pretty standard, but you also have the separate item resolver for layout service, which you also need to override in case of adding or changing something in this process. Because when you request the item from the layout service, exactly the layout service item resolver will handle the request. Also, GSS cannot resolve virtual folder by default, so we were surprised a bit, and there are 2 options how you can fix that. You can extend GSS up to ensure that the SC site parameter is always populated in the calls to the layout service. But in case of using or creating more than one GSS app, you need to ensure that you add the same logic for each GSS app, and which is not really useful from my point of view. And we did it in another way. We just override a Sitecore resolving process. So I have a blog post about that. Actually, I will share a link a bit later at the end of presentation. And probably last thing that I want to share is so at the beginning of the presentation, we have a global data which is stored outside of the site, and also we know that each site and each GSS app has a configuration is in Sitecore, and always the GSS app has the same path as a website. And when you try to open the website, Sitecore tries to resolve the GSS app, and Sitecore does it based on the context item. So based on the path of the context item, it tries to resolve the root of the site, and using the root item of site, it tries to get the GSS app. But when we try to open the item from the global data, especially in the experience editor, we cannot any site behind of this item, and we got an exception when we just tried to open the experience editor for the global items, and we overrided the resolve GSS app template function processor to fix that. Actually, we get the pass the GSS app pass based on the context side, and the context side is always resolved based on the URL, so it works fine. So there is 3 links for the blog posts related to the related to this presentation. So you can make a screenshot, or probably can share the links in the chat if somebody interested in. And just a few words about the process that we faced working with GSS. Our client decided to work with separate vendors for backend and front-end developer. And actually, our company just did a backend, and another company did front-end. And front-end guys joined the team a few months later, and when probably all contracts, I mean components, were already done in Sitecore, which is raised a lot of communication, because it is not possible probably to do that, to prepare all contracts from the first attempt, because so sometimes you think in another way as with the front-end developers. Sometimes some fields is not necessary, sometimes some necessary fields are missing, and so it was a difficult communication between the front-end and back-end developers. And another thing, we had to support experience editor, and when front-end developer doesn't have any Sitecore background, it's really difficult to build a front-end part which is will compatible with the experience editor, because probably if you build the experience editor supporting, you should know that sometimes you need to add some labels, you need to add sometimes some edit frames and all other Sitecore specific things that you cannot add if you never worked with Sitecore. And it also requires some additional communication, additional training and explanation for front-end developers that what should be done to support experience editor. In my point of view, it's probably impossible to do a good solution with a front-end team that never worked with Sitecore projects, but it is just my opinion. And probably that's all that I wanted to share today. And thank you for attention. And any questions? I'm ready for questions now.
Okay. Anybody else has any questions before I jump in? Okay. I just had a question around the initial architecture diagram that you showcased, where there was like 2 groups, like the content delivery and the content management.
Yes.
In the content delivery, there was not a connection between Solar, and you specifically told that Solar is not used for the content delivery. So I was just curious, like how, without Solar, like how do you get that? Is it just because JSS so it works, or am I missing something there?
Yes, because we don't need the Solar, because we use Algolia search.
Okay.
And we populate Algolia from the CM server directly. And then we use Algolia from the JavaScript from the GSS app directly. And CD server doesn't use Solar and search at all. So actually, we don't we don't have any components that requires search on the server side actually.
Okay. Because for instance, in a regular Sitecore scenario, we might have items, for example, like more than 100 items, we would go with a Solar search for any small component that you want to pull out some items, or you want doing like a template level search or something with Solar.
Yes,
or
but
just replacing it with Algolia, like the search engine for that?
yes,
Okay.
If if I can add just two cents there, because of the performance, because we were part of this architecture
Mhm.
effort with Artyom and his team, because customer wanted performance first, and they were cognizant around the time to first byte around the globe,
Mhm.
just dealing with complexity, distributing Solar globally would not be ideal. Algolia is a globally distributed Elasticsearch. So once you're on higher tiers, you get sub-second time to first byte around the globe, which is pretty awesome. You could combine the two. So Algolia can be used for full text search and for pulling client side, like faceted navigation, stuff like that. Solar can still be used behind the scenes as a iQueryable implementation. So effectively for your render contents resolvers, you can still assemble that via Solar, but that will be done kind of as a part of the layout service execution, and it will be cached by Akamai. So I don't think there were use cases calling for that. And I think even dealing with a little bit more expensive query using Sitecore Fast Query or just kind of standard Sitecore query would not be big of a deal because of that global caching. So you will, worst case scenario, you will execute that expensive query once per all users, right? So that gets you out of the need to overuse search query for data access.
Okay. Yeah, makes sense. Um, okay. So maybe another question around the same concept. Like, so how do we handle the publishing scenario? For instance, when you're dealing with CM server, certain things are published, and that's where your search engine will grab the data, or how does that work? This the Elasticsearch that you mentioned, is it going to grab it from CA server or CD server, or like how does the publishing come into that?
so we negotiated with the client that we update our Algolia index, Algolia once in half hour.
Okay.
So we have a scheduled task that run every 30 minutes and get latest updated items and put it to the Algolia. So we have some delay between item is published and it is appeared in the front end actually.
Okay, so there is like kind of a 30-minute delay. So
Yes.
as per the customer requirement, performance is more important than this aspect of things. So should be fine. Okay. Okay, the other question related to the performance again for Alex here. When you mentioned the personalization is taken care at the edge level, can you just brief about that? You did speak about it, but I'm just trying to wrap my head around the idea behind how would the personalization happen at the edge level? Is it going to talk back to the Sitecore and like respect it, or is it going to be like, okay, there are like 4 different scenarios of personalization, let me cache all the 4. In this there is a URL, or in this there is a geo information, so let me serve this content with that content, and it makes that intelligent decision at the edge level itself, or is it going all the way back to the Sitecore?
Uh, it doesn't go to Sitecore. That's the whole purpose of it, is to give CDN all variances of content.
Mm-hmm.
So users will never see all variances because that's something the origin will provide to Akamai when it's pulling, the Akamai is pulling during cache miss, right? So the page will have, say you have 4 variances of component, it will have all 4 baked in with the descriptors that kind of decorate, like this part of the DOM is for this variance, this part of the DOM is for another variance. And those decorators, this is what a CDN can execute and rewrite response only with the right variance for that particular user. This means that you cache the page once, but then depending on the context that Akamai is aware, whether It's cookies, HTTP headers, um, geo context, device context. It's able to execute those if-else statements and rewrite the response accordingly. So the configuration data is provided by Sitecore once, it's cached together with the page, and then the decision on what to drop from the HTML or from JSON, that's up to Akamai to decide based on the rules that also coming back from Sitecore.
Okay, so we
sense?
do all the configuration on the Sitecore, and once it's fetched into Akamai, and then the Edge takes care of the decision made on the fly, providing content whatever is needed.
Yeah, exactly. Imagine if instead of the Edge, you had your own proxy server that has access to request response, right? And in that response, you free to initiate the response the way you want it. So that's pretty much what happens on Akamai level.
So we don't do any complex configuration or anything at the Akamai. It's more like you do like your regular stuff on the Sitecore, and then everything is taken care of automatically.
Yeah, you need to enable Edge site includes feature in Akamai, which is just a checkbox, and the rest is taken care of.
And by any chance, do you know any other CDN providers are supporting this kind of Edge personalization?
We got it working on Cloudflare as well.
Okay.
Other CDNs, it's coming. This is the area where they start competing on ability to execute logic. So there will be more and more options coming out. So Netlify is working on an option. So that's and that's just one approach. Another approach that we have is JavaScript flavor. So if your CDN is quote unquote dumb, it's not not able to run logic, then you can render it either in the browser, or if you have Edge worker environment that can effectively render your pages as like a Lambda function that's responsible for each rendering. You can also use that. Like Rescher is one of the CDNs that does it. Cloudflare is another one that does it. So there's at least 3 different flavors: client side, CDN, and Edge server side rendering option. But all of them are happening outside of.
When you said dumb thing, I just something came to my mind is more Microsoft Azure CDN, which we are currently
dumb and expensive.
Oh my God. We're currently using CDN with Azure, and it's really ridiculous for what we pay. And the service, like we're even thinking of moving away from Azure and move into Akamai. Or like Akamai is kind of like the leader to my thought, like the first with the CDN and stuff. But honestly, with Azure, what we pay and what we get is ridiculous.
Akamai is a Cadillac. I mean, you have the image optimization is out of this world. We're not talking about even video optimizations they do. It's crazy, and you cannot beat 250,000 points of presence around the world. It just that's kind of hard. So if you have customers especially in Asia, in Australia, and you have to host your origin somewhere, Europe or US, that's extremely painful. We measured time to first byte from Sydney to Dubai. That was over 4 seconds just to get the page. That never works. So if you customers that have global, they want to have proper global reach and optimize for that, there is really no other way. Imagine cloning your content delivery environments and synchronizing publishing targets around the world. It's just
that's too much.
Too much, exactly.
And the other thing just want to share with the group is or maybe I will ask you this question, like how long does Akamai take to do like a purge or something, like if you want to do like
5 seconds.
Okay. It'd be funny that I share it. I'm writing a blog together for the Azure mess that I'm dealing with, but Azure gives you, you can do only concurrently, you can do 50 purge at a moment, and then 50 purge per 10 minutes. So I was just asked the support, hey, what happens? I have like 6,000 items. I need to do a purge order. And I gave the formula for the calculation. It takes like 20 hours.
Mm-hmm.
The response I got is, yeah, you might not be surprised and it might take 20 hours. I said like, really? Who's going to wait 20 hours for site purge?
Well, yeah, the patience of enterprise users, it's that's
No,
cannot be understated.
but at least I want to share the experience with other people before stepping into Azure CDN, just better summit kind of.
Yeah, and there's also a new generation of CDNs, like CDNs like Netlify. They are quite special because first they have instant cache invalidation, and they become your origin. So you deploy your site into it, and then
Okay.
by virtue of doing the deployment, it handles propagation around global nodes and cache invalidation. So think about like blob storage with Azure CDN in one package, but something that is extremely simple and also runs the build jobs for you. So if you want to go proper Jamstack where you do static export of your Sitecore site, Netlify is it's a great platform and it's super cost efficient to get started, and it's more it costs a bit more incremental there, and this is where they solve the problem of cache invalidation, which is just it's the best part.
Yeah, only thing holding us right now is more on the personalization aspect of things. They, spend a lot of time and effort in getting all this personalized, and I think we are also having a session in the symposium this year talking about that. So that is something like a blocker where you said like Jamstack, I cannot like export an entire site and let's throw it in, but whatever you both were talking, like having a combination of edge personalization and still have the benefit of like the lesser time first time to buy kind of that will be like a win-win rather like putting entirely on a Jamstack kind of.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so other question I had is related to uniform. What does uniform play a role in this? Is that a server that is being used to do something here, or how does it come into this?
I would think about it as an extension module on top of Sitecore and middleware between delivery platform and your Sitecore server. So in this configuration, where you don't want to do Jamstack, which is static export, it acts as the personalization layer. So it will augment page output with the rules embedded in the markup that can be executed on a CDN level. So it is a Sitecore module that is installed and extends this rendering capability for Sitecore MVP and for GSS.
And that can be plugged into different type of CDN, whatever is the client's preference on, like if they want to go Akamai or if they want to go Cloudflare or whatever, if they have a preference and enterprise agreement with them.
Yeah, exactly. So we meet them where they are in terms of their CDNs. If they're shopping around, we can make a recommendation because depending on where the customer is that a greenfield, how much of the dynamic functionality that already built out. If the site is we look at majority of functionality, it's still fairly static. Like we're still baking the pages, but the pages are identical for user A and user B. So at that point, what's the point of having all those being baked at runtime and consuming compute? And it's not the most green way of doing it. It's not the most efficient way, especially cost. Like everyone is looking into their Azure bill and trying to find ways of optimizing it, especially now. So with that approach, you can downscale quite a bit. And with Jamstack approach, you get rid of Sitecore CD servers that are currently responsible for baking the pages. With this approach, you still need a Sitecore origin, but you don't need that much of horsepower. So uniforms, it's what extends Sitecore capability to offload more logic and functionality to the edge. And all the lost capability in terms of tracking. That's another aspect which is tied to page rendering process. We have a JavaScript tracker that supplements this capability. For other CMSs that we're working on, the story is slightly different because the situation is different. So for Contentful, it's more of a personalization capability that we add into Contentful, which makes it possible to use it as more of a digital experience platform, not just CMS. So it's bring your own CMS, bring your own CD, and bring your own static site generator. And depending on where you are, we'll meet you wherever you are. So we have quite a wide spectrum of these capabilities at this point.
More of a JSS question to Artsem. When you're building this, or like you said, like there is a different vendor they're building this Java, the JSS app for. So maybe a dumb question, but I really don't know a lot about JSS or learning about it. But when you said experience editor support kind of thing, do you support that at the app level, or is it more like, I was thinking more the experience editor will be done more in the Sitecore backend level, and we don't have much of an editing experience in the JSS app itself?
No, so actually, experience editor is a responsibility of GSS app.
Okay.
So GSS provides some rebuild the fields. Yeah, so that you should use based building your components, and then Sitecore can render these fields in a way which will allow you to use it in Experience Editor actually. So definitely, if you build some custom component, it will work with Experience Editor. Alex can correct me if I'm wrong. But all default fields will work with the Experience Editor by default. But front end and GSS app is responsible for that. You cannot affect this process from the back end.
Okay. Do you have anything like a demo site or anything that would you willing to be showing? Or I know you had like, you cannot show the client side, but
it is really too big to prepare some demo site. Actually, I thought about that, but it means to build everything from the scratch.
Okay, I see. Yeah, I was just a bit curious. Like we have seen more of the JSS stuff, at least I think in 2019 hackathon, or there was some, like one of my friend was trying to do this, with one person totally not knowing Sitecore, and one just who is more on Sitecore, he doesn't know anything about JSS kind of. And they were trying to build something.
Who won?
What is that?
Who won out of those two? Oh, they were working together.
Working together. So, you know Yogesh, right? Yogesh Patel.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so he was more the Sitecore guy, and one of his team member was totally not exposed to Sitecore. He was just a front-end developer. So they were trying to build something together. We were a little hesitant, to be honest. Till now, JSS is something like, oh, okay, I don't know how that's going to work kind of thing. But I think that's the way things are going, or the direction that things are moving, and we should start off towards it.
What we're hearing from customers is that their major pain points is finding and retaining talent that is able to keep evolving their site, and it is struggling finding developers like ASP.NET developers becoming rare, Sitecore developers becoming even rare, and then you have SXA to be added on top. So you're talking about very niche. So being able to at least decouple the presentation layer and build it in somewhat a bit more agnostic manner, there is You cannot get rid of Sitecore developer. That's not the intent, but the intent is to diversify your project and maximize on specialization, right? Because we know full stack is really hard, and like knowing all ins and outs of React front end tools, plus knowing backend, it's just like who has 8 hours a day to actually keep up with what's going on. So being able to deliver high quality digital product that maximizes the expertise on the back end, on the front end, requires sort of this two-speed architecture where there is a contract between the two, back end and front end, but they can go crazy with the back end integration, maximizing like a back end extension, all that, and front end is completely unchained. That becomes, customers want it because they cannot why, so becomes prohibitively expensive. And everyone that's entering the job market now, I doubt they will become, ASP.NET developers, or not the majority of them for sure. So where's the market moving in 2 years in terms of projects expertise? Right now, you can look into the job sites for React. You can find projects much easily than before, and there's enterprise demand in that. It's especially here in the States.
Yeah.
I've done about 20 Sitecore JSS camps, and they're all React, which sort of it's a really strong signal. Enterprises are adopting. They're slow in this adoption, but it's happening.
Yeah, glad when you said that my teammate moved out and totally out of Sitecore and moved as a React developer.
Can I ask something on top of that, Alex? So you're mentioning React a lot. What about Angular and other frameworks? Are you seeing React winning over the others, or is it just an example?
Yeah, hi, Eduardo. Cheers. I mean, Angular has its place. I think using npm.js download stats for Sitecore JSS itself, you can see how the gap is huge. I think it's 1/10 of the downloads for Angular. So it's still there, and I think it's a good technology. It's a bit, I would say this is where we're entering personal opinion territory. I think it's a little bit, it's better fit for business apps rather than front ends like customer facing solutions, because this is where you want to go as lean as possible, and Angular is not very lean. And looking into, there is a state of JavaScript survey every year. It's and it's published on the website. Just looking into like decline of Angular over the years, it's quite clear that there's not much hotness like happening around it. Like there's plenty of more lightweight alternatives. So Angular is a full framework. It's sort of weird. We're kind of going full circle again. Folks hated Angular because it's a full framework. It's too much, as too much to include it. We don't need. Let's assemble our own front end stack. And React is a library, so it's framework versus library, which gives you more flexibility. You want to plug in your own styling, your own routing framework together with React. So you kind of chef of your own stack with React and Vue, for that matter. They subscribe to similar philosophies. And now now it's sort of going back to frameworks again, with Next.js being the framework for React, adding the missing batteries. So it comes with routing, plugin model, styling baked in. So, and you can start with 0 configuration. But I think React has got so much traction, then it's hard to imagine anything catching up. Vue.js is another, I'd say, sibling technology subscribing to similar philosophy, but even easier to get started than React. So anybody that's just picked up now, they tend to prefer Vue.js over React. React can be a handful at this point of the game. And then there's new interesting options emerging, Svelte, and which is even more, I would say, they go. It adds the script to your application, which is best for performance. But they still in this hipster territory. So I think React is here to stay. Its backwards compatibility story is outstanding. Upgraded from 15 to 16, I think, without any code changes, no rule breaking changes. So like it's really solid. But what's it's missing, it's like older pieces of your front-end application stack. Like how do you do server-side rendering? How do you do, if you want to do static export, you want to pair even React with a framework. So Next.js is emerging as the go-to framework for React, and Nuxt is for Vue.js, and it also allows you to do static export. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, are working on a product like JSS or Uniform, you're not looking to embrace every single framework out there. So you need to focus on what's being supported. So I guess React is probably way to do it as well, but there's some support for Angular. So those are the main ones. Okay, fair enough. Thank you.
Anyone else any questions? Thank you, Artsem and Alex. It has been really thoughtful and really useful. Gives a better idea about JSS and for Uniform, I probably would reach out to Alex if we can present this as a separate thing, how exactly it works, and that would be really helpful for people to understand well.
Absolutely, anytime.
Thanks everyone for joining us, and have a good evening.
Thank you. Thank
you, Alex. Thank you,
us.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.